even just with your physical well-being, running into a disaster as a one component. Another component is the courage to speak up, knowing that others, critics, people who are jealous, are gonna now look at you as a target potentially, right? So what's the source of your courage such that you're willing to do the difficult thing, the challenging thing?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, the source of my courage is also a challenge, which is I do have a level of stubbornness when somebody doesn't believe in me. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this. And actually, the more vocal someone comes out about how they think you're going to fail at something, or how you think it's stupid, or they think it's inappropriate, or you should just keep quiet, the more you're willing to speak out. I have a couple of interesting examples. So at the time with Architecture Humanity, my co-founder and I felt that there was an award that was being given primarily to male architects, and they weren't recognizing some of the female partners or the female architects in the field. And so we spoke out about it. And our board of directors formally reprimanded us for weighing into a subject that had nothing to do with our organization. And it was just basically like, you guys just keep quiet about this, right? And so, rather than shut up, we just became more vocal about it, because it almost became like a question of like, why would you silence someone for speaking up against this particular issue? I also felt strongly about architects being somewhat culpable in the human rights violations that were happening around the world with large-scale development. And the fact that I knew, based on some research and some documentation I had done, of certain architects who had unknowingly allowed there to be human trafficking in the construction of their buildings. And I wanted to have a very open and honest conversation about the fact that we as an industry are culpable in the trafficking of humans, right? Like, we always focus on, say, sex trafficking, but there's many forms of human trafficking. And when I did that, that ended up becoming a source of debate. And people got very divided about it, and certainly put a target on my back. And it was kind of a surprise, rather than us having a frank, honest conversation about it, having, architects becoming incredibly defensive. So I think I don't know, I think you have a belief mechanism. And when you get questioned in that belief mechanism and you're willing to back down, maybe you didn't have that belief in the first place.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just an idea that you were exploring. I was offered a job about 3 years ago to work for a startup company, making a lot of money, figuring out their social impact.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was working on these schools on the Syrian border where I wasn't getting paid to fundraise. But the idea of the project in Syria was so compelling. Even though I wouldn't be financially benefited, it was more important for me to finish that and not take the other job. I wouldn't have been true to myself for the other project, because that's not why I did the project. So I think people are very dismissive. It's not courage. It's, do you value yourself?
Mm.
And when that value gets questioned, are you willing to fold and bend because of it? Right?
I love that.
So when someone says, they question you, like, how can you raise a family, or how can you be a decent kind of parent? Because, you could have just taken a job with lots of money and your kid could go to some fancy college. I'm hoping at some point that my kid realizes that I took the more difficult road because my core values dictated me to do that. And it was the right thing to do, even if it caused kind of financial and social challenging situations.
Yeah. The hardest thing, and also the simplest thing, is know thyself. that to me is one of the life's challenge, really. Know thyself and operate and behave and say and do things based on how you have determined to live. And then you, my friend, have, for me, an outsider point of view, do that. And that's what I meant courage. It's not necessarily the external challenge, but the courage to face the criticisms, the self-doubts, and the difficulties, the judgment from within and without, right?
And massive personal blowback, because people say this phrase as if it's a negative phrase. They say, "Oh, you're nothing but a do-gooder."
Mm-hmm.
Like, "Oh, you just want to, like, one of those guys who just wants to help the planet, right? Oh, you're in this just to get your name out there, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Rather than saying, like, you're dedicating your entire existence towards this solution. We've somehow turned helping your fellow man as a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Interesting.
even in the media, when someone says, like, do good design,
Mm-hmm.
or do good innovation, or do good housing,
Mm-hmm.
it also infers that everything else is bad. And so
Mm-hmm.
people that are professionals then take it as a like, if you get, and this happened to me for years, when someone would give me some award or something that said I was a do-good architect, so many famous, very well-known architects would get upset and would be verbally dismissive, as if I was somehow saying that their work was not good, that I was just helping poor people, and those people are willing to take anything. And so, I think it's not just the complexity of doing the work, it's the fact that you're willing to have your entire reputation and personal bias against you be dismissive.